On the 6th of September 2006, Susan Walters, known at the time as Kuhnhausen, was working in the intensive care unit at Providence Portland Medical Center in Portland, Oregon. After completing a tireless shift, she decided to stop by a salon to freshen up her hairstyle, carve out some time for herself, and relax. Susan left the salon feeling content, driving home to a charming single-story house surrounded by a neat little fence.
So I came home and turned off the alarm, and I had found a note from Micah in the mud porch, so I placed it here with my other things, and then I just headed out towards the front to get the mail. And after getting the mail, I returned in and kicked off my Birkenstocks and rounded the corner towards my room to get out of my working clothes. And when I got here, I noticed that the door was almost closed instead of open, and the room was very dark. When I pushed the door back and stepped forward, my attacker began to hit me in the head and face with the hammer. I pushed into him. I said, "Who are you? What do you want? Get out of here." And he continued to hit me with the hammer. When I saw the look in his eye, I knew that this was something that was not foreign to him.
The attacker was about 6 feet tall, appearing like a giant emerging out of nowhere. He wore a striped shirt and a baseball cap pulled down low over his eyes. Long gray hair was tied back in a ponytail, hidden under the cap, while his gray beard and mustache completely covered the rest of his face. While the natural response for most people would have been to flee, Susan was no ordinary person. At 51 years old, she had spent 3 decades working as a nurse in the intensive care unit, a profession known for its challenges. She had faced injured men in agonizing pain and calmed patients under the influence of prohibited substances, and to be able to handle any similar situations and remain calm, she, like other nurses, regularly trained in the art of self-defense. Susan knew how to evade a blow or break free from a hold. Years of training had instilled confidence in her. When the stranger tried to attack her with a claw hammer, instead of fleeing, she chose to stand her ground and fight. Standing at 5 feet 4 inches tall, Susan was significantly shorter than her attacker, and her knees, on which she had recently undergone surgeries, were hurting. However, she outweighed the man, and she knew that this weight advantage could work in her favor.
When I saw in his eyes that he was here to kill me, I became enraged. Of course, when it all happens, you don't really have time to formulate a plan. What I did during the attack was, in me as a result of my nurse's training, I fought, and I knew that for whatever reason, he wanted to kill me. And I knew that I wanted to live. At one point, I got the hammer. My dad was a carpenter, and for self-defense, we had hammers. And he said, use the claw end, it works the best. And we were literally nose to nose, struggling over a hammer. And he said, you're strong. But he was not afraid. He was surprised.
Susan miraculously managed to knock the hammer out of the attacker's hands, then delivered a couple of blows to his head. When he grabbed the tool again, Susan seized him by the throat, demanding to know why he was there. "Who sent you here?" she yelled, clutching the criminal's throat with both hands. The stranger's face turned red, then blue. Susan panicked, releasing her grip and attempting to escape. However, before she could even leave the room, the man caught her in the hallway. He shoved her, causing her to fall and split her lip on the floor. The events that followed continue to haunt her to this day.
So I began to bite him. I bit him on his arm, I bit him on his flank, I bit him on his thigh, and at one point when he was slightly turned, I bit him in his genitalia. My voice was gone.
However, Susan wasn't finished. She tried to search the man's pocket for an ID or any other item that could be hidden under the furniture or bed, helping the police track down the criminal.
I pushed him flat to the floor, and I got up on his backside, and I leaned forward, and I put my left arm under his neck, and I squeezed, and I said, "Tell me who sent you here, and I will call you an ambulance." I wanted him to be afraid, as terrified as I was, but he instead tried to flip me up off of his back. And that's when I leaned forward until he stopped moving. I wasn't sure whether he was unconscious or dead. But when he was still, I grabbed the hammer and I ran. Sorry, guys.
After rushing out of her home, Susan headed to her neighbors, who called 911. The dispatcher was astonished when Susan's neighbor reported that she had possibly strangled an unknown man who had broken in and attacked her. The operator asked for clarification on what exactly had happened, and the neighbor explained that Susan had applied a chokehold and struck the man with a hammer. When asked if the victim needed medical assistance, the neighbor replied that Susan was a nurse herself and it was the man who needed help. The dispatcher asked not to touch the hammer anymore and assured that all services were on their way. Susan was taken to the hospital where she worked, and it was then that her worst fears were confirmed. The man who had attacked her was dead.
They sent an officer to come and be with me. When I saw his face, the first thing I asked is he dead? And he said, yes, he is.
Investigators immediately identified the criminal using a driver's license found in his back pocket. He turned out to be Edward Dalton Haffey, a 59-year-old Vietnam War veteran who was already on the police's radar. While in the hospital, Susan wondered who could have sent this man to her, as she had no enemies and had never seen the criminal before. As for Susan herself, she had a challenging childhood. Her parents loved her, but they failed to show her what a happy marriage looked like through their own relationship. Life seemed chaotic. Her parents divorced when she was in the 2nd grade, and they frequently moved to different cities, states, schools, and houses. Susan lived with one parent and then the other. After graduating from school, she completed training and received a nursing degree. In the early 80s, Susan moved to Oregon and later to Portland, where she worked as an emergency room nurse. Her life was dedicated to being a bring light into the lives of her patients.
I really feel that that's one of the biggest advantages, is that people are very appreciative of what we do for them.
Susan is an experienced nurse who seems to have a special approach to each patient, showing a deep love for her job and a sense of special responsibility.
One of the nice things about emergency nursing is there is a great deal of variety. You have to be able to make critical decisions in a very short space of time, and you have to trust that you're doing the right thing.
Susan was sociable and lively, enjoying parties and stand-up comedy shows, yet she remained single. However, in 1988, her life took a turn. Susan dared to place an advertisement in the local newspaper's dating section. "I'm not like everyone else. Single, looking for a family, 33 years old, overweight, but I love life to the fullest. Looking for a lonely man who wants more from a relationship than just a slim figure."
I was nervous. I had not ever done anything at all like that.
Michael responded to the ad. 39 years old, unmarried, finding joy in nature from exploring caves to sunset beach walks.
Mike was very soft-spoken. He was polite. He would laugh easily. I felt like I got a good deal on a used car. We talked for probably 150 hours over the course of a couple of weeks. We talked about what we wanted from life.
Susan and Michael chatted over the phone for a couple of weeks. Michael had a pleasant voice and was not afraid to discuss serious matters. They had their first date in February 1988, taking a leisurely stroll through the botanical garden, feeding the ducks and tossing unsalted peanuts to the squirrels. They got married within a year.
Things were good in their relationship. In spring and summer, we would look for butterflies. We were birders in the fall. We had taken a trip and had seen quite a bit of the Oregon coast and had a fairly good time.
Unfortunately, after several years of marriage, the couple, as often happens, settled into a routine. Their long walks in the park became a thing of the past. Michael was against Susan meeting with friends and demanded that she account for every dollar spent, even though she was the main breadwinner of the family.
I would probably say his negativity is the most marked thing that I could see had a big effect on Sue. If she and I decided to go to a movie, he would be grumbling about the fact that she spent money on the movie.
One thing about Mike is he always worked. But I don't believe Mike ever felt financially secure in our relationship because I brought more money into the home. He always scrutinized the accounts, so he would get anxious over small purchases that we could easily afford.
Susan and Michael did not have children, and Susan realized that Michael had never been truly happy, and she no longer believed he could make her happy either. After 17 years of marriage, Susan decided she had had enough. She still cared deeply for her husband, but she no longer wanted to live with him. In 2005, she asked Michael to move out, and he went to live with his father. However, the couple continued to maintain a friendly relationship. Michael often visited Susan to help around the house or just to spend time with the cats. As a result, Susan never changed the locks or the alarm code, which symbolized the date of their wedding. The day after the attack, Susan, accompanied by her friend, came home to collect her things, and it was her friend who noticed a backpack in the basement that did not belong to Susan.
That backpack was Ed Haffey's, and in that backpack was some crucial evidence that we were able to tie to Ed Haffey and to Michael Kuhnhausen. We found a piece of paper in there that said, "Call Mike, need a letter." We immediately started putting two and two together with Ed Haffey and Mike Kuhnhausen.
In the backpack, they found sweet syrup, diabetes pills, $200 in cash, a notebook, baseball cards from Michael's collection, and a check made out to Michael Kuhnhausen. Meanwhile, the autopsy conducted by the pathologist revealed that prior to breaking into Susan's home, Haffey had ingested an almost lethal dose of prohibited substances. The criminal had been living in a trailer recently. According to his relatives, he had grown up in a more than well-off family and had built a successful career as a tennis player. However, everything changed 15 years ago in 1991, when Haffey arranged the murder of his former girlfriend, whose body was found in a river. Haffey confessed to the crime and spent the next 9 years behind bars. Upon his release, he moved to Portland, where he struggled to find stable work. He finally found it in July 2004, when Michael Kuhnhausen hired him as a janitor at a store selling adult videos. Later, the police discovered that on the day of the attack on Susan, Michael had traveled to the coast and checked into a hotel. The next day, he returned to Portland, where he bought a revolver from a pawn shop. Convinced of Michael's involvement in the attack and aware of his armed status, the police took all necessary precautions to ensure Susan's safety, as she was still alive and her ex-husband might return to finish the job. Just 8 days after the attack on Susan, Michael was arrested. He tried to play the victim, claiming suicidal intentions and denying involvement, but his story was not believed. A few weeks prior, Michael Kuhnhausen had lost his job, had no savings, and no place of his own. Additionally, Susan had named her brother as the beneficiary of her insurance in case of her death, a fact Michael was aware of. However, Susan owned a house worth $300,000, which would have become Michael's property in case of her accidental death, making the motive more than clear. Initially, Michael denied any connection to Hafe, but detectives proved otherwise. Michael was presented with documents indicating that they had worked in the same store. Other evidence included the absence of signs of forced entry into the house, and the security system had been deactivated using a code while Susan was at work. Michael continued to deny everything, claiming he had deactivated it when leaving a note for Susan. Despite his denials, the evidence was mounting against him. On September 18th, a former cellmate of Edward Hafe contacted the police and reported that Hafe had asked him to participate in a robbery scheme, an insurance scam, as he explained it. They met with the mastermind, who turned out to be Michael Kuhnhausen, who offered $5,000 if he helped Hafe kill his wife in a murder-for-hire plot. The former inmate, of course, refused. On September 30th, 2007, Michael Kuhnhausen admitted to ordering the murder of his ex-wife, promising Hafe $50,000.
I've hurt a lot of people in the last year, and I'm sorry. That's all I can say.
Ultimately, Michael was sentenced to 10 years in prison with the possibility of early release on parole.
I am absolutely concerned about his parole. I believe that as soon as he is free, I run the risk of murder or murder-suicide.
Immediately after the verdict, Susan filed a lawsuit seeking $1 million to prevent her ex-husband from having enough money to hire another killer. On September 14, 2014, Michael Kuhnhausen was supposed to be released from prison. Once lively and adventurous, Susan was prepared for this. She became very cautious, always sitting facing the doors, taking new routes to work, and moving to a new home in Portland located on a cul-de-sac. The house surrounded by gravel so that footsteps could be heard if anyone approached the doors. Susan was truly afraid for her life and took every precaution to ensure Michael could never get close to her. However, Michael never had the chance, as he passed away from cancer on Friday the 13th of June 2014, 92 days before his release. From his letters to Susan, it is clear that he did not consider himself guilty and only pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Michael considered himself a real victim of events.
I know with certainty that it's a terrible thing to take another person's life. I don't know that you ever get over having killed another human being. I've always said I don't take any pride in what I did, but I also feel no shame.